So we can use the AC method, and that's what we're going to use. Oh boy, wrong button. There we go. All right, now, so just like before, right? We want to compare. We want to get A, B, and C. Well, just by comparing, that's why I'm setting this, the general trinomial, equal to this one. We can see that A is 6. A is the leading coefficient of x of the trinomial. It's the coefficient of x squared, so it's 6. B is the coefficient of x, which here is negative 31. Again, you can't forget the negative sign. C is the constant term. So in this case, C is 5. Okay, so now what? Well, A times C, right? That's going to be 30, 6 times 5. B is negative 31. So we want two numbers now, right? Whose product is 30. The sum is negative 31. Okay, excuse me. So the product is 30. The sum is negative 31. While it's tempting to try 5 and 6, that's not going to work, right? 5 plus 6 is 11, so that's not going to work. What about 30 and 1? Well, the product is 30. The sum is 31, though. But we don't want that. We want negative 31. Right? We want negative 31. So what's going to work? Negative 30 and negative 1. Right? The product is 30 by our sap and sun rules. The sum is negative 31. Okay, that's awesome. So what do? Well, it's just like before, right? That sum, we're going to replace B by. B is negative 31. We're going to replace negative 30 plus negative 1. Excuse me, we're going to replace negative 31 with that sum. That's what I'm doing here. All right, that's cool. So negative 31 is negative 30 minus 1, okay? And negative 31, excuse me, is being multiplied by x. So the whole difference here is multiplied by x, the whole sum. So we have to distribute. And we get negative 30 times x minus 1 times x, which of course is just negative 30x minus x. So that tells us that what we end up with is this. This was the polynomial we're factoring. That turns out to equal this thing. Okay, that's good. Awesome. Now we're going to use factor by grouping here. And again, the GCF is 1 because we have a coefficient of 1. I mean, you have minus 1 here. Well, actually minus 1. But still, the only factor of minus 1 is 1. So the only common factor the minus 1 here has with any number, any coefficient or constant term is 1. So in the GCF, our B, the greatest common factor of the coefficients and the constant term, is going to be 1. And there's a non-zero constant term, so m is 0. So altogether, the GCF of this thing has to be 1. All right. So what do we do next? We have to use the rest of factor by grouping. Now remember, this is what I like to do. What I like to do is I like to make sure the second and third term, there's addition between them. Right? So this minus, I change it to adding the negative. Now we can add parentheses. You know, again, if you do that, you're less likely to make a mistake. I know I'm less likely to make a mistake when I have addition here. So we have these two groups. right? And also, right away, you should be able to see that the second and fourth term, they're opposite in sign. We have minus and addition. So from here, we're going to have to factor out a negative. Okay, well, let's do this. So we have to handle each of these groups individually. So from the first group, right, the smallest exponent of x, right, is 1. The smallest exponent of x is 1. Okay, so m is 1 in the GCF. Now 6 is a factor of 30, right? So because of that, 6 is the greatest common factor among 6 and minus 30. Now we have a minus here. Okay? So 6 is the greatest common factor among 6 and minus 30. I mean, if you were to list the factors, you would see that 6 is the biggest common factor. So we get the GCF is 6 times x to the first, which is 6x. That's what we get. Good. Okay, so what do we do next? We factor it out. So we have 6 times x. We put it in front. We have to get what's left over. We divide. When you divide into each term. Okay. When you do divide into each term, here we have 6's, they cancel. X squared over x is just x. Here, the x's cancel. 30 over 6 is just 5. So we have 6x times x minus 5. Now that's the first group. Are there any questions before I keep going? Okay. Well, for the second one, negative x plus 5, right? Well, here we have a non-zero constant term. So our m is 0. Okay, the m is 0. We have negative 1 is a coefficient. Just like 1, though, negative 1's only factor is 1, because factors can only be positive. So the only common factor among negative 1 and 5 has to be 1. Again, negative 1, the only factor of it is 1. Factors can only be positive. In fact, any number and its negative, any integer and its negative will have the same factors. Okay? So so the greatest common factor among the coefficient negative 1 and 5, the constant term, b is 1. And m is 0, so we get the GCF here is 1. So that's what we get. Now, once we know that, but remember also, as I said before, I did say this already, we have to factor out a negative from the second group, right? Because the second and fourth term have opposite signs. So that's what I'm doing here. We're going to factor out negative 1. So I bring the negative 1 in front, and I divide to see what's left over. For the first quotient, negative x over negative 1, well, that's just x. Now, negative over negative is positive, sap and sun rules. 5 over negative 1 is negative 5. So we get negative 1 times x minus 5, which is the same as this. Good. So that's what we get here. Now, again, notice in parentheses, right, where we plug everything in, we get x minus 5 is the same thing in both groups, from both groups. In parentheses, we get the same thing. We pull it out. From the first group, we have 6 times x. From the second group, we have minus 1, right? If you pull the whole thing out, you leave 1 there. And so we get x minus 5 times 6x minus 1. And so using that 5x was the GCF first, we put that in front and we factored. That's what we get. Now again, you know, here I'm skipping some steps, right? It's a little, I'm trying to make it visual here, right? You know, if you take out x minus 5, right, we had a 1 here, so the 1 stays. But you could also show more steps. That's what I'm doing here, right? When you factor it out, what you're really doing is you're dividing. As you can see, we divide. And when you divide into each term. From the first quotient, this cancels with this. These cancel. And you're left with the 6x. Here, it cancels with itself, x minus 5. And that's why we have minus 1 here. And so now we get, that's how we actually get the right answer. But again, you know, I know showing all these steps can be confusing. That's why I put this slide here. So, okay. I was going to have you try an example, but we have less than a minute. This is actually where I got up to in the other class. So I think we're going to have to stop here. Are there any questions though? I know this is not easy stuff. Believe me, I completely understand. Okay? But if you do have any questions, don't be afraid to email me, okay? You know, I want to help. But if you don't contact me, then, you know, there's nothing I can do. So, all right. So I guess we'll stop here. So if I don't hear from you, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you too. Have a great day, everyone. So I'll see you on Wednesday. Remember, tomorrow's a wellness day, so.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.